tonight's episode. The Prisoner. It's been I'd strongly recommend reading this aloud, or in first person to get a better experience. It's been 3 years since I've been captured and taken away from my home. I was about 8 when it happened. The world was being taken over by machines and slowly turning into a metallic hellhole. My home, what was once filled with grass and large waterfalls, was now being controlled by the robots and their leader, what the prisoners call the Madman, seeking to take over my planet. No one in my cell knew his name, only that whoever met him was changed. They were altered into mechanical tools of destruction. They said that the robots would find and kill anyone, just to bring back the lifeless, torn bodies to be used as experiments. After a couple of days, they started to tell me about themselves. Their names were Chase, who was 6, 2 years younger than me at the time. Maurice, who was 18, and Hedge, who was 13. They were all siblings. They told me about their hometown, where everyone had a rather normal life, and that most people were happy. They told me of the forest they used to play in, filled with life, grassy fields and large waterfalls. But when the Madman came and attacked their home, the forest was decimated. The whole forest went to flames, and the people who were trapped in there were either burned alive or captured. The robots dragged the 3 out of their house, along with their parents and little sister, as they watched as their father was beaten and brutally murdered, while their mother died trying to protect their little sister, who sadly lost her life in the process. They were taken prisoner and were to be sent back to the Madman's base. When the ship took off, they saw the devastation. The forest burned, their closest friends lie dead, everything they held dear to them just vanished. Chase asked me about what my home was like, but I didn't tell them anything. It was just too hard for me. Besides, at that time, I was only 8. That night, all the painful memories came back to me. My mother trying to protect me, my father trying to fight the robots off, warm blood splashing my face when my mother was shot in the head, my home burning to the ground, my friends and family being taken prisoner or slaughtered. It was all too much for me to handle. I had nothing. The only thing I had left to remember my mother by was the shoes she gave me on my birthday. The day before the nightmare began, I started to cry, remembering my father taking me to the park every day, my mom reading me a story every night, and all 3 of us constantly going swimming. Constantly. Now all of that was gone. Everything I ever loved, I ever cared for, gone in a few hours. The morning came and I noticed that Chase was being taken by one of the guards to be tested on. Maurice tried to fight them, but he got beaten up badly. I tried to help him, but I ended up getting knocked out in the process. I woke up an hour or 2 later to find Hedge and Maurice sobbing. They told me what happened. They heard the screams of their little brother being tortured, the Madman laughing like a psychotic killer, and the next thing they knew, Chase came out of the room, now half robot. I couldn't imagine how they felt at that moment. All I could do was say, "I'm sorry. If I had reacted quickly enough, he could still be alive." Maurice came over to give me a hug and said, "There is nothing you could do, kid. Don't blame yourself. I should have protected him. He was my brother after all." That night I couldn't sleep. Chase was gone and I felt guilty, and no matter how much Maurice or Hedge protested, I just felt like I could have done something. I noticed Hedge was still up, so I came over and sat next to him, asking if he was okay. He told me that Chase was always a good kid. He got on Hedge's nerves a lot, but overall he was a happy child and always looked on the positive side. When they were taken prisoner, the first thing Chase said was, "On the bright side, Mom and Dad and Sis are in a better place." Hedge told me that Chase's birthday was today, and what did he get as a present? He was turned into a cyborg. I told Hedge to get some sleep, and I just lied there, just hoping this was all a horrible nightmare, and that I would wake up to the smell of my mother making breakfast. But I knew that was too good to be true. I just rolled over and fell asleep. Before I shut my eyes, I looked up and said, "Happy birthday, Chase." That's awkward. A week went by. Half the prisoners were turned into robotic freaks, and soon Hedge was the next one to be turned. I didn't want to look at what Hedge had become, and I wasn't about to think about it either. Maurice didn't talk at all after that. He was silent and kept to himself. I couldn't blame him. He lost the only things he had left in his life. His brothers, who he felt responsible for and promised to protect, were gone. I occasionally sat next to him and asked him how he was doing, but I got no response. I then proceeded to tell him about who I really was and where I came from. I told him about my mom and my dad, the park nearby my house, why I was born different from most people, everything. He just looked at me, patted me on the back, and said, "Thank you." I was relieved to hear him say something after all this time. The next morning, Maurice woke me up with a loud yell, and I saw him being taken away. He resisted as long as he could and told me to get out of here. I noticed the cell door was open, and the guards were too busy trying to deal with Maurice. I told him I wasn't going to leave him, but he responded, "My brothers need me, kid. You need to get out of here and find help. The prisoners here talk about a rebellion, an underground army forming to fight against the madman. Find them. They'll help you." Taking his advice, I said goodbye to Maurice one last time and left. I made it out of the prison, and I continued to run. I didn't stop, and I didn't look back, fearing that the guards were close behind me. I ran for hours until I finally passed out and didn't wake up until the next morning. I woke to find myself in a familiar place. This was my home. I then passed out again, feeling really tired. After a while, I felt water splash my face, and I noticed a guy looking over at me and said, "Hey, little guy, you okay?" I responded, "Yeah, thanks." I was running away from the madman's guards. He then explained he found me lying in the middle of the devastation and noticed I was still alive. He carried me all the way to the freedom fighters' base. I then told him what I went through and that I came here for help. After a while, he asked me, "What's your name, buddy?" "Miles. But everyone calls me Tails." "What's yours?" "Sonic. Sonic the Hedgehog."